the Russians and these other countries.
But the world remained a dangerous place. On June the 14th, 1985, TWA Flight 847 took off from Athens in Greece on its way to Rome.
A few minutes into the flight, I look up and there are people walking down the aisle, yelling, head down, no talk. And I didn't know what was happening, really.
The flight was hijacked by two Muslim extremists with ties to the Ayatollah Khomeini in Iran.
Their latest demand is that all Shiite Muslim prisoners being held by Israel be released.
And I'm watching this, and all of a sudden my brother walked in the door, came downstairs, and he said, "Mom is on that plane."
Paula Sukforth, the mother of six, was one of 153 people on board, most of them Americans.
They were going to kill someone every 5 minutes if their demands weren't met.
The hijackers forced the plane on a frightening odyssey from Athens to Beirut, to Algiers, and back to the darkened airport in Beirut, where the plane was refused permission to land.
He has pulled a hand grenade pin and he is ready to blow up the aircraft if he has to. We must, I repeat, we must land at Beirut.
You have no permission to land Beirut. The airport is closed.
I expected that we were going to crash, so this is how it was going to end.
When things looked absolutely hopeless, the runway at Beirut was finally cleared, but the crisis was far from over.
TWA 847, they are threatening to kill the passengers. They are threatening to kill the passengers.
Their first victim was Navy diver Robert Stetham.
I just can picture that body coming out the door and landing on the tarmac, and then thinking, oh God, they're actually killing people.
I wrote my name and address and telephone number on my stomach, just in case I was found dead somewhere.
Unwilling to risk more American lives, Ronald Reagan abandoned his own no negotiations policy with terrorists and worked out a deal to free some prisoners held in Israeli jails in exchange for the TWA hostages.
I didn't expect the United States to negotiate. In hindsight, I'm glad they did.
I never thought I would see her again, and there she was. It was wonderful.
The summer of 1987 was not a good one for the Reagan administration. Congressional hearings that summer revealed that the administration had illegally sold arms to Ayatollah Khomeini's Iran and funneled the profits to the Contras in Nicaragua. For the first time, President Reagan's popularity plummeted. And then, on October the 19th, Black Tuesday, the stock market went into free fall, losing 508 points. And moral empires, too, came tumbling down when several televangelists were charged with financial crimes or personal sins. Suddenly, it seemed that not all was well in the United States. In the Soviet Union, on the other hand, there was a whole new sense of optimism. After a succession of old men and old-style rule which had left the Soviet Union in deep stagnation, a vigorous new leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, came to power in 1985. Gorbachev soon began to make changes in a country long ruled by repression and fear. He instituted glasnost, or openness, and suddenly there was freedom of speech.
It was discussion openly. And I was there. I was right in the middle of it. It was something absolutely incredible.
Alexander Zurbin was a composer who had a studio in Moscow's Pushkin Square.
At the time, it was a center of political discussion. Thousands of people. One said Gorbachev is terrible, he is scoundrel, and I said, no, he is a great man, we have to support him. It was times when, all the hopes were open. We just were absolutely overwhelmed.
But Gorbachev's attempt to restructure the Soviet economy, perestroika, did little to shorten lines for the paltry number of available consumer goods. Soviet hopes for material progress demanded cutbacks in their defense spending, and this led to a series of summit meetings with President Reagan. The first one was in Geneva in 1985. The next one was at Reykjavik in Iceland. On a weekend in October 1986, the leaders got down to the serious business of disarmament.
And they were negotiating, frankly. Both sides are going to give up all their nuclear weapons. All their nuclear weapons.
President Reagan's director of communications was Patrick Buchanan.
I just couldn't believe that a decision of this magnitude was being made by two men on a Sunday afternoon. It's late in the afternoon, they'd taken a break, and so I got right out there. I wanted to see exactly how he looked. He looked as tough as any customer I have seen.
We're not through.
And Gorbachev told Reagan, we're going to do the deal, but you've got to give up SDI. The Soviets had spent $1 trillion building the greatest land-based missile force on Earth. And here was Ronald Reagan, who was developing a system that was going to turn it into junk. And they believed he could do it. Ronald Reagan slammed down his hand on the table, got up and left. No.
That was the end of the summit, but not of good relations between the two leaders. A year later, Mr. Gorbachev came to Washington. Sidestepping the issue of the Strategic Defense Initiative, the leaders signed a more limited arms reduction treaty. Mr. Gorbachev was very popular in America.
Gorbachev's motorcade came around the corner on the Connecticut Avenue, and suddenly the motorcade stopped. And then the door opened and Gorbachev got out and began working the crowd along Connecticut Avenue like an American politician. People around me were rapt. I remember a young woman looking out through the crowd and smiling on her face, and she said, "God bless you, Mr. Gorbachev."
It's great that he came out to meet us all like that. That was very special. He didn't have to do it, and he did it. I am very surprised and pleased.
What do you think of Gorbachev?
The guy is a PR genius. I mean, jumping out of the car like that. Unbelievable. That's great.
You got to shake his hand.
I did.
6 months later, President Reagan went to Moscow.
There was a sense that this long nightmare of the threat of nuclear holocaust, of the Cold War, somehow that was coming to an end.
We find ourselves standing like this.
We meant to change a nation, and instead, we changed a world.
'89 was a momentous year. First in China, where just at about the time that Mikhail Gorbachev was paying a visit, Chinese students occupied their country's most important square.
What I'm seeing on television cannot be happening. Chinese students marching into Tiananmen Square carrying a large plaster goddess of democracy, very similar to the Statue of Liberty.
In the heart of the largest communist country in the world, the American symbol of freedom towered over demonstrations for democracy.
There clearly was a historic, significant event. I had a feeling it wasn't going to last very long.
And it did not. On June the 4th, the demonstrations were crushed. Hundreds of people were killed. But what the students and workers had attempted would change China forever. All over Eastern Europe that summer, democracy movements were gathering strength. Poland was gearing up for free elections. It was happening in Hungary and Czechoslovakia, and behind the walls in East Germany there were pro-democracy demonstrations. People were demanding change. On November the 9th, the East German government finally gave in to the pressure.
You wanted to see what's really behind the wall. What have they been hiding over there? And it's just people on the other side, waiting to see loved ones.
The Berlin Wall was breached. The Iron Curtain had been lifted. The hopes for freedom kindled by Gorbachev's reforms in the Soviet Union proved mightier than walls.
We were crying, watching them tear down this thing that had haunted them for so long. And I remember thinking, what joy. You know, 'cause you could just feel it coming through the television on these people. And I thought, man, that's what it's all about. You know, conquering your ghosts.
Having gone into war to prevent the spread of communism, and now, a decade and a half later, the wall comes down, it causes you to stop, it caused me to stop and think, wow, this sacrifice that people made, 58,000 in Vietnam, I don't know the statistics from Korea. I think they made a contribution. It would be too heartbreaking to think that they didn't.
Many historians actually believe that the 20th century ended with the fall of the Berlin Wall and that the 90s represent the first decade of a new era. Why don't you judge for yourself when we take a look at the century's last decade? That's the next episode of The Century, America's Time. Thank you for joining us. I'm Peter Jennings.